Okay, we got Kyle Kulinski and Emily Jaczynski here at the desk. We're going to have a nice power panel. We're going to discuss the speakership, RFK. Let's start with the speaker. Let's put this up there on the screen. Jim Jordan has lost support yesterday for his second failed House Speaker vote. There will maybe be another vote today. Everything is up in the air, and it comes after a sustained campaign by Jordan allies. We can put the next one, please, up there on the screen to try and, arm twist some of the people who had actually voted against him. I'm actually fine with that, but it didn't work. So I guess we're not fine with it whenever that happens.
This dude's wife got anonymous emails like, yes. Your husband better support Jim Jordan.
I support that.
Apparently,
no, I
Saagar
sent that email.
That was you, Emily?
Yeah.
Saagar sent
it. I sent it.
I told him not to.
Yeah. Emily, give us your take. You're tapped into conservative circles. First, just what's going on? What is going to happen? There doesn't appear to be a vote today. Is Patrick McHenry the Speaker pro temp? Is he going to get expanded speaker powers? Deal with the Democrats? What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so there's a package being discussed right now to give Patrick McHenry, the pro temp, people remember him banging the gavel really hard in his little bow tie, to give him powers until January 3rd. So for the rest of the year, and then they can come back to the table and figure things out. Well, that's not going to happen because now conservatives, the same people who were doing the arm twisting campaign to support Jim Jordan, are basically never McHenry because the conservative movement is mounting a campaign to say a deal to put McHenry in office is a deal with Democrats. Basically, to make that math work, centrist Republicans are probably going to need the help of centrist Democrats, and maybe then they can get it. Either way, it's going to be difficult because of that never McHenry faction of Jordan supporters. The problem with the math, though, is that there are never Jordan supporters that are now in the McHenry camp, which basically is impossible. And again, this is why after 15 ballots with Kevin McCarthy, they went through those 15 ballots. McCarthy went through those 15 ballots because every single person in the Republican conference knew that only Kevin McCarthy could bridge what are now the people in the never McHenry and the never Jordan camps. He was the only person who could do it. And that doesn't mean Kevin McCarthy is amazing. It doesn't mean Kevin McCarthy is a hero or the savior of the Republic. It just means he had put years of work into bridging those two groups. And nobody else is able to do that. So they're completely at an impasse.
He also had no shame. He was willing to do whatever.
Yeah, he's a shame.
Needed to be done. Yeah, to get it done. I mean, what are you making of this whole situation?
First of all, I think all the speakers are like that. The ones who actually get to power. It's you raise the most money and you can appease the most people behind the scenes and you gotta act like a snake in a sense and say one thing over here, one thing over here. But I found it really interesting because Jim Jordan was a vocal supporter of McCarthy, and he actually argued with Gates on the House floor that I think McCarthy should stay in power. But he also has Gates' blessing because he's a mentor to Gates. So the thing that I'm stuck on is if it's not him, who's it going to be? Because this guy, in theory, should have the blessing of the McCarthy people and the Gates people. And I think that what it comes down to is Jordan is an outsider conservative firebrand who's built his name on right-wing media. And I don't think he does the behind-the-scenes backslapping politics like a speaker needs to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
And so I think, never mind. That's all I'll say.
Well, I mean, let me push back on your McHenry thing here because I have made the prediction that it will just end up being McHenry by default. So I'm very invested in my prediction coming true. That's the only thing. I really don't care about this fight otherwise, personally. But it seems to me like no one has the votes. Jim Jordan is actually further behind where Kevin McCarthy was.
Oh yeah.
And so the status quo is the most likely outcome here, where McHenry may not be elected speaker, but they could figure out workarounds of all right, government funding is about to run out. We're about to have a shutdown a very short period of time. It's not like the House was doing that much anyway. So if they come up with these workarounds of all right, I guess you can keep the government open. I guess you can pass your Israel and Ukraine and border aid or whatever it is that they're putting this package together. That still seems to me like the most likely outcome because I don't see any other person being able to cobble together sufficient votes to get this done.
I agree with that. I mean, if I had to put money on any outcome right now, it would be the McHenry outcome. And I think your reason for that is really probably the most correct. Default is the easiest way for everybody.
Inaction is the default.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so at the same time, though, that's becoming more and more difficult for people as we're seeing this develop right now, and you've probably noticed this over the last couple of days. People who work in the sort of activist conservative circles are putting together a really strong campaign to pressure, and this is actually partially what pushed people away from Jordan.
Yeah.
But they're really trying to say, they're trying to make this a red line in the sand. They're trying to mobilize constituents and say the Republican grassroots wants Jim Jordan. If you're voting against Jim Jordan, if you can't get on this bandwagon, we are going to cast you as a rhino. We're going to punish you. And for some of them, that might be good. They might like that in their districts and purple districts.
Right.
On the other hand, probably for most of them, it's not good. And so it's becoming, I thought Jordan was basically dead in the water when so many people started shifting towards McHenry, but then you started to see this really get traction in the conservative movement, and that does make it difficult for Republicans to vote against it. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen.
That's right. Kyle, you have something to say?
Yeah, I have a question for Emily. Is it not Jordan because people are still mad at Gates, or is it not Jordan because Republicans from purple districts are like, I can't do Jordan because, you know, he supported the insurrection, et cetera, et cetera. Which is, what, is it both of them, or what is it?
I think it's mostly that, because Jim Jordan, like, basically was one of the early Freedom Caucus people. He was very close with Mark Meadows, founder of the Freedom Caucus, actually with Ron DeSantis. All of those guys were the bomb throwers in the Boehner era. And so they earned so much bad will. Like, people just bitterly resent them for throwing the House into chaos so often during those years. They blame them for Trump, they blame them for January 6th, and some of that is now personal, not just political. So it's a really, like, a lot of bitter feuds are just.
Did some of them
over.
fall in line, like the purple district Democrats? Because I know 22 now voted against Jordan. So would you say like the 22 Republicans are the more moderate Republicans, or were there also like 30 more moderate Republicans who were like, all right, I'll just fall in line and support
Well, a lot of them did, but don't forget that of that 20, the New York caucus in particular is highly represented because a lot of those people are like Long Island folks, and they're more in purple districts. My personal favorite thing I saw floated behind the scenes, Krystal, is Jordan was like, okay, well, maybe we'll lift the SALT cap.
Yes, he did. He did.
And just to explain to everybody, the
Allegedly.
SALT is this state and local tax deduction.
Tax cuts for rich people.
I love that.
It is straight up lifting a tax cut for the rich people.
But
As
New York
in,
votes.
so they can write, because New York has very high state and local taxes, so that they would be, previously, before Trump, they were able to write off that portion from their federal income tax. And they're like, this is an outrage. We're being double taxed. The overwhelming majority of the benefit for the SALT cap goes to people who make over $1 million per year. Therefore, it is the #1 priority of the New York Democrats and Republicans. And I'm not
And New
not
Jersey,
joking.
too. That's Gottheimer's New Jersey.
They literally call
yeah.
him Mr. Salt. Anyway, so I will
gonna get
say,
weird.
the one promise that I think Jordan has is he was like, okay, guys, what do you want? And they were like, you got to lift the salt.
That's
like,
amazing.
so-
That is amazing. I mean,
have
I
anything.
have to think that another part of it is not just like the things he's done in the past and the bomb throwing nature and, like, you know, the shutdowns and the debt ceiling showdowns and all of that. But they also have to be worried about, if he is their leadership in the House, what is he going to do going forward? Because he's very interested in the, like, you know, impeach Biden and let's have all of these hearings and investigation. I mean, that's what he wasn't legislating. Those are the things that he was focused on. Right. So I have to think part of their fear is like, how are we going to look if this guy who's been nothing but a bomb thrower is our leadership in the House? Like, we can't be closely associated with this guy. And Kyle, like, there's nothing he can promise them. He can't promise them to, like, I'm no longer going to be Jim Jordan.
But, like, is there really that much of a substantive difference on policy between, like, him and Kevin McCarthy? Like,
Well,
I'm genuinely curious about that.
In my opinion,
yeah,
no.
because, like, so is
It's
it like
the vibes.
Like, would you
It's the
not
vibes.
get if you have Jordan as Speaker of the House? Would you just like not get bills that pass
Well,
at
it
all,
depends
or
on
a
which
budget
policy.
that passes at all?
It depends on which policy. For example, Kevin McCarthy was far more, I think, less ideological on Ukraine. He was one of those people who's like, look, I just want to appease everybody. Personally, I'm like pro-Ukraine. He almost certainly would have brought something to the floor. Jim Jordan, from the very beginning, was like, I'm not bringing any aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, but
on the
then
floor.
Now with
Well,
Israel, they're
but
comparing it
then,
together.
but then
but he's
behind the
spoken out
scenes,
against that.
but
Yeah.
then
That'll
behind the
happen, though.
scenes,
It'll happen.
there
I
was
know.
at least
Yes.
reporting that he indicated to moderates who were on the fence, like, well, maybe I would put Israel and Ukraine aid together. So I don't know whether that was just like him lying to try to get their votes or whatever, but he definitely left them with the impression that that's what was going to happen.
Maybe someone needs to lift the salt in Ukraine.
Yes, there you go.
But anyway,
I don't think the oligarchs are paying
The
taxes.
Israeli salt tax must be lifted. Jim Jordan is your man.
See, Kyle's question is super interesting, I think, because Kevin McCarthy, it speaks to, I think Kevin McCarthy moved over a lot. And when I talked to him, he talked about how the first impeachment was, he didn't use this word, but kind of radicalizing for him.
Yeah.
And the question then becomes, what's the substantive difference between Jim Jordan and like now Ken Buck, who is out in moderate land? Yeah. It's been
Or
weird.
John Boehner, right? Like, is this what happens when you become speaker? Is like, well, I guess in some ways we got to get something done. Like, we have to get a budget passed. So I guess I got to do this and this because Democrats hold the Senate. Democrats have the White House. You can pass virtue signal bills all day, but Biden can veto it or the Senate, not pass it.
I will say, and this is actually why I thought Jordan was the best candidate, is I thought he was the best to avoid a government shutdown because he had the most credibility amongst the people who would have pushed for a shutdown. As in, he would have been able to wrangle votes that I think McCarthy never would have been able to on a future debt ceiling. So you almost want like a member of that ilk to be in higher power because when the push comes to it, they're like, look, guys, we got to shut down. You know me. This is the best deal I possibly could get. They never trusted that with McCarthy, and they said that over and over.
That's true.
During the
could
debt
also be
ceiling
a
fight, during
principled
the
voice
shutdown.
for a shutdown, too. You know what I mean? That's the risk you run.
Yeah, but you know,
like he might be like, no, I want to do the shutdown, too.
Maybe, but the political calculus is, look, Republicans have lost every shutdown ever. You know, that every single time they shut down the government, they took the public ire and the blame, all the way going back to Newt Gingrich. Jordan is, I mean, even right now, Emily, you know this, like he hates to lose. Like he would not want to be on the losing end of a government shutdown and be like like a villain in the country's eyes for the wrong reasons. He's happy to do it whenever it comes to being anti-Hillary or anything for a political benefit, but I don't think that there is that benefit for that. So I don't know. Last thing, Krystal, what do you think?
Well, the last thing I would say is, part of why I haven't been that invested emotionally in who ends up as speaker is because I do feel like whoever ends up in that position is going to be in an extraordinarily weak place, just as McCarthy was.
Yeah, you're right.
And so it's not like McCarthy was like running the show. He was trying to appease these various factions and navigate in this certain way and ultimately, ended up in an untenable position where he had no other option but to basically make a deal with Democrats and then head out the exits. There was no other move left on the chessboard. And so to me, whether it's Jim Jordan or McHenry or Ken Buck or whoever the heck else might pop up, they're going to be basically subject to those same pressures. They're going to be in an incredibly weak position. They're still going to have these same factions that they're trying to deal with. This has really been the case for Republicans for quite a long time. So that's why I feel like the person who ends up in that slot, it probably doesn't make all that much of a difference, my personal opinion.
Well, and they're obsessed with the motion to vacate because that's what empowered Matt Gaetz.
Yes,
So that's on the table in these negotiations. And if that doesn't go away, there's nothing you can do about Matt Gaetz. There's always going to be a Matt Gaetz, and it just takes one when you have the motion to vacate where it is.
Good point.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.